If you cannot control yourself, you are not dangerous. You are predictable, and predictable people are easy to manipulate, easy to provoke, easy to defeat. For a long time, I misunderstood what it meant to be dangerous. I thought it meant being dominant, loud, aggressive, quick to respond. I thought power was intensity. I thought strength was emotional fire. But life corrected me. Years ago, I was in a situation that still stays with me. A professional setting, a high-pressure moment. Someone questioned my work publicly, sharply, almost disrespectfully. I felt the heat rise instantly. My chest tightened. My mind raced with comebacks. I reacted, not violently, not dramatically, but emotionally, defensive, fast, slightly sharp. I thought I had defended myself. Later, I realized I had exposed myself, because another man in that same room was challenged too, and he did something different. He paused, he listened, he nodded, he responded calmly. Fewer words than I used, no tension in his voice, no visible irritation, just clarity. Guess who walked out of that room with more respect? That was the day I began to understand something most people never do. Real danger is not emotional. Real danger is controlled. Aggression is loud. Control is silent. Most people believe being dangerous means intimidating others, but the most formidable people I've ever met were not intimidating at all. They were composed, steady, hard to read, impossible to provoke, and that is what makes them powerful. Because if someone can trigger you, they can control you. If someone can predict your reaction, they can outmaneuver you. If someone can shake your emotions, they own the moment. Self-control is not weakness. It is strategic restraint. I've seen this in friends. I've seen this in mentors. I've seen this in people who rebuilt their lives from chaos. One of my closest friends used to lose his temper easily. Smart guy, capable, ambitious, but reactive. A single disrespectful comment could ruin his entire day. Arguments escalated. Opportunities slipped away because he couldn't detach from his emotions long enough to think clearly. Then something shifted. He started practicing pause. Not perfection. Pause. 3 seconds before responding. Slow breathing under stress. Fewer words, intense conversations. Within months, the change was visible, not because he became colder, but because he became harder to move, harder to shake, harder to manipulate. People began choosing their words more carefully around him, not because he was scary, but because he was steady. And steadiness is intimidating in a world addicted to reaction. That is what this audiobook is about. Not about becoming cruel, not about becoming emotionally numb, not about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself so deeply that nothing outside you can dominate you. Over the next 8 chapters, we're going to break down the core elements of becoming dangerous through self-control. You will learn how to control your reactions when provoked, separate emotion from identity, master silence, endure discomfort deliberately, stop seeking validation, control your body language, become difficult to manipulate, and ultimately own your inner world. This is not motivational hype. This is psychological training. So you don't need to be louder, you need to be sharper. And I want to be honest with you. Self-control is not natural. It goes against instinct. Your brain is wired to react, to defend, to explain, to prove, to retaliate. That is the primitive system. But discipline builds a different system. One that waits, one that observes, one that chooses instead of reacts. And when you begin to live from that system, something changes. Your presence changes, your tone changes, your decisions change, your confidence becomes quieter, but stronger. There's a specific kind of calm that unsettles people, not because it's aggressive, but because it signals something deeper. This person is not easily moved. That is dangerous. Dangerous people are not emotional storms. They are controlled environments. They don't explode. They calculate. They don't overshare. They observe. They don't seek approval. They move with intention. If you've ever felt like your emotions betray you, if you've ever said something you later regretted, if you've ever allowed someone to pull you into an argument you knew wasn't worth it, then this is for you, because the strongest form of power is not external dominance. It is internal regulation. I'm not teaching you to suppress emotion. Suppression creates pressure. Pressure eventually explodes. I am teaching you to process emotion without surrendering to it. There is a difference. You can feel anger without becoming angry. You can feel fear without acting afraid. You can feel insulted without reacting insulted. That gap between feeling and reaction is where power lives. Most people never train that gap. You will. And by the end of this, you will understand something clearly. Being dangerous is not about hurting others. It's about becoming unshakable. Because when you control yourself, you control the moment, you control the energy, you control the outcome. Power begins where reaction ends. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Control your reactions. Power is often lost in seconds, not in major decisions, not in dramatic failures, but in small emotional reactions that feel harmless in the moment. A single look, a short message, a tone that feels slightly disrespectful. And suddenly, your state shifts, your chest tightens, your voice changes, your words come faster than your thinking. It feels automatic, almost justified. But here is the truth. The moment you react without control, you give away leverage. Reaction is emotional reflex. Control is strategic restraint, and the difference between the two determines whether you are predictable or dangerous. I didn't understand this early on. There was a time when I believed fast responses showed confidence. If someone challenged me, I answered immediately. If someone questioned my decisions, and I defended them right away, I thought speed meant strength. Looking back, I see something else. I was easy to move. All someone had to do was press the right emotional button. Doubt, criticism, subtle disrespect. And my energy shifted. That's not power. That's vulnerability. I remember a situation that changed how I saw this. During a professional discussion, someone questioned my approach in front of others. It wasn't aggressive, but it carried an edge. I felt it instantly. Instead of pausing, I explained quickly. I justified. I clarified more than necessary. I walked away thinking I handled it well. Later, I realized something uncomfortable. If I had simply listened, paused and responded calmly in fewer words, I would have appeared stronger. Instead, I looked slightly rattled. That difference matters more than people admit. Because reaction exposes your internal state. Control conceals it, and concealment under pressure creates psychological advantage. A close friend of mine went through something similar. He used to struggle with criticism at work, not because he was incompetent, but because he cared deeply. When someone challenged his ideas, he leaned forward, spoke faster, and tried to prove himself. He was intelligent, his arguments were valid, but his energy betrayed insecurity. After receiving direct feedback from a mentor, he made one simple change. He stopped answering immediately. When challenged, he would pause. Just 3 seconds. He leaned back instead of forward. He lowered his tone instead of raising it. He asked a clarifying question instead of defending his position. Within weeks, something shifted. The colleagues began responding to him differently. Meetings felt calmer around him. His presence felt heavier. One person even said, "You seem unshaken lately." That word is important. Unshaken. Control creates stability. Stability creates authority. Here is the principle at work. There is always a gap between stimulus and response. Inside that gap lies your freedom. Without training, that gap collapses instantly. Emotion floods the system. Words follow. Tone sharpens. The moment is lost. With training, that gap expands. Even 2 or 3 seconds is enough to shift the outcome. During those seconds, you reclaim ownership. You decide whether the emotion deserves expression. You decide whether the situation requires response. You decide the tone, not your ego, not your impulse. This is what makes someone difficult to manipulate. Because manipulation relies on reaction. If someone can provoke you, they can guide your behavior. If someone knows exactly what will anger you, embarrass you, or make you defensive, they can predict you. Predictable people are easy to control. Dangerous people are not predictable. They are measured. They are selective. They are slow when others are fast. The first layer of reaction control begins with the body. The body responds before language does. Heart rate rises. Shoulders tense. Breathing shortens. Train the body, and you calm the mind. Relax your jaw deliberately. Unclench your hands. Slow your breathing through your nose. Keep your posture neutral. Even if emotion is present internally, external stillness changes how others perceive you, and how you perceive yourself. And I once observed a disagreement between two individuals in a tense setting. One became animated quickly, hands moving, voice sharpening. The other barely moved. His responses were slower, his tone lower, his face neutral. The energy in the room shifted toward the calm one. Why? Because calm under pressure signals control, and control signals strength. The second layer is timing. You're not obligated to respond immediately. Silence is uncomfortable in heated moments, but silence creates leverage. When you pause, others often fill the space. They reveal more than intended. They adjust their tone. They sometimes soften without realizing it. Speed is emotional. Slowness is intentional. The third layer is interpretation. Not every challenge is an attack. Not every disagreement is disrespect. Not every raised eyebrow is judgment. Insecurity personalizes everything. Strength evaluates first. Ask yourself, is this truly a threat? Or is my ego reacting? That question alone can prevent countless unnecessary reactions. A powerful shift occurs when you realize something simple. You do not need to defend yourself in every moment. Sometimes the strongest move is restraint. Sometimes the strongest signal is calm acknowledgement. Sometimes the strongest answer is fewer words. Reaction satisfies emotion. Control builds reputation, and reputation compounds over time. Begin practicing this immediately. For the next 24 hours, delay every emotionally charged response. Not messages, not criticism, not sarcasm, not tension. Pause before replying, even briefly. You will notice something subtle. When you remain steady, others recalibrate. When you don't escalate, tension weakens. When you refuse to react, you disrupt expectations. And disrupting expectations is powerful. Control your reactions, and you control the moment. Pause is power. Chapter 2. Separate emotion from identity. One of the most dangerous mistakes a person can make is confusing what they feel with who they are. Anger rises, and suddenly you are an angry person. Fear appears, and you believe you are weak. Doubt shows up, and you question your entire identity. Emotion becomes identity, and when that happens, control disappears. There was a period in my life when stress controlled more of my behavior than I realized. I didn't think of myself as reactive. I thought of myself as passionate, driven, intense. But intensity without regulation is instability wearing confidence as a mask. If something went wrong, my mood shifted. If plans changed, irritation surfaced. If someone disappointed me, it lingered longer than necessary. I justified it by saying, "That's just how I am." That phrase is dangerous. "That's just how I am" locks emotion into identity. But emotions are temporary states, not permanent traits. A relative of mine went through a difficult stretch in his career. Long hours, uncertainty, financial pressure. Over time, he began saying things like, "I'm just a stressed person," or "I'm naturally anxious." The more he repeated it, the more it became true. His identity fused with his emotion. And when identity fuses with emotion, you stop managing it. You start defending it. Instead of saying, "I feel anxious," he said, "I am anxious." There's a massive difference. I feel anxious creates space. I am anxious creates permanence. Dangerous people understand this distinction clearly. Emotion is information. It is not instruction, and it is certainly not identity. The moment you detach emotion from identity, and you gain leverage over it. Think about it this way. Weather changes constantly. The sky does not. Emotion is weather. Identity is sky. Storms can pass without defining the sky. But if the sky believes it is the storm, chaos becomes constant. A friend of mine learned this lesson during a painful breakup. He felt rejected, humiliated, and betrayed. At first, he internalized it completely. I'm not enough. I'm always the one who gets left. Maybe I'm just not built for relationships. Notice what happened. Temporary pain became permanent self-definition, and when he saw himself that way, his behavior followed. He became guarded, defensive, slightly bitter. Conversations carried a subtle edge. Eventually, he began journaling under guidance from a therapist. One simple rule changed everything. Every time he wrote about his emotions, he had to start with, "I feel," not "I am." I feel hurt. I feel disappointed. I feel insecure. Over time, something shifted. He began observing his emotions instead of drowning in them. Observation creates distance. Distance creates control. When you can observe something, you are not controlled by it. This is a skill, not a personality trait. Emotions will always arise. You cannot eliminate them, nor should you try. Suppression creates pressure. Pressure eventually explodes. Control is not suppression. Control is awareness without surrender. Here is the process. Step 1. Label the emotion. When something triggers you, pause and name it. Anger, embarrassment, jealousy, fear. Labeling activates the rational part of your brain. It interrupts the emotional spiral. It turns chaos into data. Step 2. Separate it from identity. Say internally, "I am experiencing anger," instead of "I am angry." It sounds small. It is not. Language shapes perception. Perception shapes behavior. Step 3. Delay action. No important decision should be made while emotionally flooded. If you're upset, wait. If you're hurt, wait. If you're offended, wait. Time weakens emotional intensity. And when intensity weakens, clarity increases. A colleague once told me something powerful after surviving a hostile work environment. He said, "I stopped asking, 'Why are they doing this to me?' and started asking, 'What is this emotion teaching me?' That shift alone moved him from victim mindset to strategic mindset. Emotion became information. Not attack, not identity. Information. Dangerous people treat emotion as feedback. Anger might signal a boundary crossed, and fear might signal preparation needed. Jealousy might reveal insecurity to strengthen. Embarrassment might highlight growth areas, but none of those emotions define the individual. Identity should be anchored in values, not moods. If your identity shifts with every emotional wave, others will sense instability. Stability comes from choosing who you are, independent of how you feel. You may feel nervous and still act confidently. You may feel frustrated and still respond calmly. You may feel insulted and still remain composed. That separation is power. There was a moment when I tested this intentionally. During a tense conversation, I felt irritation rising. My instinct was to sharpen my tone. Instead, I silently labeled the feeling irritation. I didn't suppress it. I acknowledged it. Then I chose my response deliberately. Calm tone, measured words, neutral expression. The irritation faded faster than usual. Why? Because I didn't feed it with reaction. Emotion needs participation to grow. Without participation, it dissipates. This is how you become difficult to manipulate. If someone insults you and you immediately react, they have influenced your state. If someone criticizes you and you internalize it as identity, they have reshaped your self-image. But if you feel the emotion, label it, detach from it, and respond intentionally, they lose leverage. You remain solid. And solidity under emotional pressure creates quiet dominance. Train yourself to notice this daily. When irritation appears, observe it. When insecurity appears, observe it. When fear appears, observe it. Do not deny it. Do not dramatize it. Do not become it. Observe it. Because once you stop identifying with every emotional wave, something changes internally. You realize you are not fragile. You are not unstable. You are simply human, learning control. Separate emotion from identity. Feel fully. Respond selectively. That is strength. And strength built on awareness is difficult to shake. Chapter 3. Master Silence. Noise is the natural reaction to insecurity. When people feel uncomfortable, they fill space. When they feel challenged, they explain more than necessary. When they feel judged, they talk faster. Silence, on the other hand, requires control. And control creates weight. There was a time when I believed that being articulate meant speaking often. If I could explain myself clearly, defend my ideas thoroughly, and keep conversations moving, I thought that made me strong. What I didn't realize was that I was revealing too much. The more you speak, the more people can measure you. The more you explain, the more openings you create. The more you justify, the more you signal doubt. Silence is not weakness. It is strategic restraint. I once observed two men in a negotiation setting. Not one spoke constantly, explaining his value, clarifying his position, reassuring the room. The other spoke less than half as much. But when he did speak, everyone listened. Why? Because silence builds anticipation. When someone rarely speaks, their words carry weight. When someone constantly fills space, their words lose density. A close friend of mine learned this painfully. He had a habit of over-explaining himself in relationships. If there was tension, he would clarify repeatedly. If there was misunderstanding, he would send long messages trying to fix it immediately. He thought communication meant solving everything instantly. Instead, it created imbalance. The more he talked, the less he was heard. Eventually, after advice from someone older and wiser, he tried something radical for him. He said less. When conflict arose, instead of long emotional explanations, he responded calmly and briefly. If the other person pushed, he listened more than he spoke. The dynamic changed. Silence forced the other person to reflect, to fill the space, to reveal their own emotional state. He told me later. I realized I was trying to control the outcome by talking, but silence gave me control instead. That's the paradox. Talking feels like control. Silence actually is control. Silence does several powerful things psychologically. First, it disrupts expectation. Most people expect reaction. They expect explanation. They expect defense. When you respond with calm silence instead, it unsettles the pattern. Second, it reveals others. When you don't interrupt, people often expose their true motivations. They speak longer. They contradict themselves. They escalate emotionally. And you learn more by listening than by speaking. Third, it protects your energy. Every unnecessary word drains focus. Every defensive explanation reinforces insecurity. Silence preserves composure. But mastering silence does not mean becoming distant or cold. It means becoming selective. Selective speech signals discipline. There was a moment that solidified this for me. During a heated discussion, Someone made an unfair assumption about my intentions. The old version of me would have corrected it immediately, carefully, thoroughly. Instead, I paused. I held eye contact. I let the statement sit. Then I said calmly, "That's not accurate." Nothing more. No justification, no emotional charge. The conversation shifted instantly. The other person began clarifying themselves instead. That's leverage. When you speak less, let your words become anchors instead of waves. Here are practical ways to train silence. First, answer shorter. When someone asks a question, respond clearly, then stop. Resist the urge to add extra explanation to secure approval. Confidence ends sentences cleanly. Second, stop oversharing. Not every thought needs expression. Not every plan needs announcement. Not every emotion needs broadcasting. Mystery is not manipulation. It is protection. The less predictable you are, the harder you are to control. Third, practice strategic pause. After someone speaks, wait a moment before responding. That slight delay signals thoughtfulness. It also prevents emotional reflex. Fourth, end conversations first. This small habit builds psychological strength. Instead of lingering for validation, conclude interactions calmly when they've served their purpose. Silence also strengthens internal control. When you speak less, you observe more. You notice tone changes. Body language shifts, subtle insecurity, hidden confidence. Observation is power, and dangerous people observe constantly. One of the most composed individuals I know rarely interrupts anyone. In meetings, he listens fully, sometimes longer than feels comfortable. When he finally speaks, he summarizes what everyone else missed. He told me once, "If you're always talking, you're never learning." That line stayed with me, because silence sharpens perception. Another important point: silence is not about avoiding conflict, it's about choosing when to engage. If someone insults you directly, silence can communicate indifference. If someone seeks to provoke you, silence denies them satisfaction. If someone attempts to escalate, silence de-escalates. Reactive speech fuels conflict. Measured silence contains it. And here is something subtle but powerful. Silence strengthens emotional discipline. When you resist the urge to defend yourself immediately, you weaken ego dependency. You prove to yourself that you do not need constant external validation. That internal shift builds identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who chooses words carefully. That identity becomes armor. Of course, silence must be intentional. Passive silence driven by fear is weakness. Intentional silence driven by control is strength. The difference lies in internal state. Are you silent because you're intimidated? Or are you silent because you've decided not to react? Only you know the answer. Mastering silence is uncomfortable at first. It will feel unnatural. You may worry that others think you are disengaged, but over time, something shifts. People begin to lean in when you speak. They choose their words more carefully around you. They sense steadiness, and steadiness creates authority. Practice this today. In your next conversation, speak slightly less than usual. In your next disagreement, respond in fewer sentences. In your next moment of tension, allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it. You will notice the power immediately. Because silence is not empty, it is controlled presence. Say less, mean more, and watch how the world recalibrates around you. Chapter 4. Train yourself to endure. Discomfort. Control is not built in comfort. It is built in resistance. Discomfort is the testing ground of self-control. It exposes your habits. It reveals your thresholds. It shows you exactly where you break and exactly where you grow. Most people are not weak because they lack intelligence. They are weak because they avoid discomfort. They avoid hard conversations. They avoid difficult tasks. They avoid emotional tension. They avoid physical strain. Avoidance feels safe in the moment, but over time, It builds fragility. I saw this clearly in someone close to me. A friend of mine wanted to change his life. Better job, better health, better discipline. But he waited for motivation. He waited to feel ready. He didn't realize that readiness is a product of discomfort, not comfort. Eventually, he made a simple commitment. Wake up at 5 a.m. for 30 days and train no matter how he felt. The first week was miserable. Cold mornings, heavy eyelids, internal resistance screaming for comfort. But he didn't negotiate with it. He endured it. Something shifted after about 2 weeks. It wasn't just his body that changed. It was his identity. He stopped seeing himself as someone who acts when motivated. He began seeing himself as someone who acts regardless. That's dangerous, because a person who can act without emotional dependence is difficult to stop. Discomfort builds detachment from impulse, and impulse is the enemy of control. Think about the moments when you lose control. It's rarely when you're comfortable. It's when you're tired, hungry, embarrassed, rejected, challenged. Discomfort magnifies emotion. And if you cannot endure discomfort, you cannot sustain control. I learned this lesson through something much smaller, but equally revealing. There was a time when awkward silence made me uneasy. In conversations, if a pause lasted longer than expected, I felt the need to fill it, to smooth it over, to maintain flow. That urge came from discomfort. One day, I decided to train it deliberately. Instead of filling the silence, I allowed it. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, sometimes longer. At first it felt unnatural, almost tense. But something interesting happened. The other person often spoke first, sometimes revealing more than they intended, sometimes softening their tone. I realized the discomfort I felt wasn't danger. It was simply unfamiliar territory. And familiarity is built through repetition. This applies far beyond conversation. Physical discomfort trains discipline. Emotional discomfort trains stability. Social discomfort trains confidence. One of the strongest habits you can develop is doing one difficult thing every day. On purpose. Not because it's urgent, not because it's dramatic, but because it's uncomfortable. Cold showers are a common example. Not because cold water has magical properties, but because stepping into discomfort willingly builds internal strength. When you choose discomfort, you teach your brain something critical. I am in control. Not the environment, not my mood, not my comfort, me. A colleague once told me that the most powerful shift in his life came from learning to sit with criticism without defending himself. Before, he would argue immediately. Now, when criticized, he listens fully, even if it stings, and he lets the discomfort exist without reacting. He told me, the first few times it felt like swallowing glass, but then I realized the discomfort passed faster when I didn't fight it. Resistance amplifies discomfort. Acceptance neutralizes it. Endurance does not mean tolerating abuse or suppressing emotion. It means remaining steady while processing it. There's a difference between reacting to discomfort and enduring it. Reacting tries to escape it instantly. Enduring observes it without surrender. This applies to physical training as well. When your muscles burn, your mind tells you to stop. That signal isn't always danger. Often, it's resistance. The same happens emotionally. When a conversation becomes tense, your mind tells you to defend. When uncertainty appears, your mind tells you to control. But sometimes the stronger move is staying present. Endurance builds internal confidence. Confidence that does not depend on comfort. And confidence built on endurance is different from confidence built on praise. Praise-dependent confidence collapses under criticism. Endurance-based confidence strengthens under pressure. You can train this intentionally. Start small. Finish tasks you don't feel like finishing. Sit in silence instead of reaching for distraction. Delay checking your phone when bored. Complete conversations even when they become uncomfortable. Each small act builds tolerance. Tolerance builds stability. Stability builds presence. Presence builds power. A man I respect deeply once said, "You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits under stress." That line stayed with me. Under stress, your training reveals itself. If you've trained comfort, you'll seek escape. If you've trained endurance, you'll remain steady. Dangerous people are not fearless. They simply do not flee discomfort. They stay in the conversation. They stay in the room. They stay in control of their breathing, their posture, their tone. And that steadiness changes everything. You don't need to become extreme. You don't need to suffer dramatically. You simply need to stop avoiding mild discomfort. Because mild discomfort, practiced daily, expands your threshold. And as your threshold expands, fewer situations can destabilize you. Imagine walking into conflict with a nervous system trained to endure. Imagine facing criticism without flinching. Imagine handling uncertainty without scrambling for control. That is not personality. That is training. Discomfort is not your enemy. It is your instructor. Lean into it deliberately. Stay present inside it. And over time, you will notice something powerful. What once shook you no longer moves you. Chapter 5. Stop seeking validation. One of the fastest ways to lose power is to need approval. The need for validation is subtle. It doesn't always look like insecurity. Sometimes it looks like kindness. Sometimes it looks like over-explaining. Sometimes it looks like constantly proving your value. But underneath it is one quiet fear. What if they don't approve of me? When your behavior is shaped by that question, you are not in control. Approval seeking makes you adjustable. Adjustable people are predictable. Predictable people are easy to influence. There was a period in my life when I didn't realize how much I relied on external validation. I thought I was simply being responsible, clarifying my decisions, making sure everyone was comfortable, smoothing tension before it grew. But if I'm honest, part of it was fear. A fear of being misunderstood, fear of being disliked, fear of being judged. So I explained too much. I apologized too quickly. I justified decisions that didn't require justification. The result? I felt drained and, strangely, less respected. Because when you constantly seek approval, you signal uncertainty about your own authority. A friend of mine struggled with this in relationships. He wanted harmony at all costs. If there was disagreement, he would bend slightly. If there was tension, he would smooth it immediately. At first, it seemed admirable. Over time, it created imbalance. The more he tried to please, the less seriously he was taken. Eventually, after a difficult breakup, he made a quiet commitment. Stop explaining every decision. If he said no, it was no. If he disagreed, he stated it calmly. If someone misunderstood him, and he didn't rush to correct their perception. The change was uncomfortable at first. He worried about being seen as cold or distant. But something surprising happened. People leaned in more. They respected his boundaries. Conversations became cleaner. Why? Because clarity without apology communicates confidence. Approval seeking often shows up in small habits, adding extra sentences after you've already made your point. Over-apologizing for minor inconveniences, explaining decisions that don't require explanation. Checking repeatedly whether someone is upset with you. Each of these behaviors erodes internal authority. Dangerous people do not require universal approval. They are not arrogant. They are anchored. Anchored people understand something simple. Not everyone needs to understand you. Not everyone will like you. Not everyone will agree with you. And that's fine. When you detach from validation, your decisions become cleaner. You choose based on values, not reactions. You speak based on clarity, not approval. You move based on direction, not applause. I once worked with someone who embodied this well. He was calm, direct, and rarely defensive. If someone disagreed with him, he listened. and then stated his position without emotional charge. He never chased agreement. He didn't argue unnecessarily. He didn't try to win everyone over. Yet people respected him deeply. Why? Because his sense of self was not up for negotiation. When validation is your fuel, criticism becomes devastating. When values are your fuel, criticism becomes information. There is a powerful shift that happens when you stop asking, "Do they approve?" and start asking, "Is this aligned with who I choose to be?" The first question gives power away. The second keeps power internal. Let's be clear. Seeking feedback is not weakness. Needing validation is. Feedback improves performance. Validation dependency shapes identity. One builds skill, the other builds fragility. Here's a practical way to test yourself. Notice how often you feel the urge to explain yourself after making a decision. "I can't make it tonight." Then comes the unnecessary paragraph. Try stopping at the first sentence. No extra justification. No nervous laughter. No apology layered over clarity. Just calm certainty. At first, it may feel exposed. That discomfort is growth. Another powerful shift is reducing social comparison. Constantly checking how others perceive you through social media, through gossip, and through indirect feedback erodes internal stability. If your emotional state rises and falls with external signals, you're tethered. Untethered individuals move differently. They are less reactive to praise, less destabilized by criticism, less dependent on attention. That emotional neutrality creates gravity, and gravity attracts respect. There was a moment that crystallized this lesson for me. I made a decision that not everyone agreed with. I could feel subtle disapproval in the room. The old version of me would have softened the decision, explained it thoroughly, tried to win back comfort. Instead, I simply acknowledged the disagreement and stayed with my choice. No tension, no apology, no defensive tone. The conversation moved on. And something inside me strengthened. Each time you resist the urge to seek approval, you reinforce internal authority. Authority over yourself. That is the foundation of becoming dangerous through self-control. Because when you do not need validation, you cannot be easily manipulated by praise or fear of rejection. You cannot be steered by flattery. You cannot be controlled by subtle disapproval. You become internally directed, and internally directed people are powerful. This does not mean becoming indifferent to others. It means caring without dependency. It means listening without bending unnecessarily. It means being respectful without shrinking. Stop chasing approval. Start strengthening identity. The less you need validation, the steadier you become. And steadiness under social pressure is rare. Rare things command respect. Let your values anchor you. Let your decisions stand. Not everyone will approve. You don't need them to. Chapter 6. Control your body language. Before you speak, your body has already spoken. Posture, breathing, eye contact, stillness. All of it communicates something long before your words arrive. And if your body is uncontrolled, your presence is unstable. You can say the right things with the right tone. But if your hands fidget, your shoulders collapse, or your breathing becomes shallow under pressure, people sense it instantly. The body reveals what the mouth tries to hide. I once knew someone who was intelligent, articulate, and highly capable. On paper, he was impressive. But in meetings, something felt slightly off. He tapped his foot constantly. His hands moved nervously. His eyes darted when challenged. No one would say he lacked skill, but subconsciously, people felt he lacked steadiness. Eventually, someone he trusted told him directly, "You're good, but you look unsure." That hit him hard. He wasn't unsure. He was anxious, but anxiety displayed through the body reads as insecurity. He began training something simple, physical stillness. Instead of focusing on sounding confident, he focused on looking stable. He practiced slower movements, intentional hand placement, direct but relaxed eye contact, breathing deeply before speaking. Within weeks, the shift was noticeable. His words hadn't changed dramatically. His body had, and that changed how people responded to him. Here is something critical. Control of the body influences control of the mind. This works both ways. When you feel nervous, your body reacts. But when you adjust your body intentionally, your nervous system recalibrates. Straighten your posture. Slow your breath. Relax your jaw. These are not cosmetic adjustments. They are neurological signals. Your brain interprets posture and breathing as indicators of safety or threat. Shallow breathing signals danger. Upright posture signals control. When you consciously regulate your physical state, you override emotional chaos. Dangerous people understand this instinctively. They move slower than others in tense moments. They do not rush gestures. They do not overnod. They do not shrink physically under pressure. Stillness is powerful. Stillness under pressure is even more powerful. There was a moment during a heated exchange where I saw this clearly. Two individuals disagreed intensely. One leaned forward aggressively, hands animated, voice rising. The other remained seated upright, hands resting calmly, breathing controlled. And the difference in energy was stark. Even though both were speaking, only one looked in control. And control of perception matters. Your body language either amplifies your authority or erodes it. Fidgeting suggests nervousness. Avoiding eye contact suggests doubt. Excessive movement suggests instability. This doesn't mean becoming robotic. It means becoming deliberate. Deliberate movement communicates intention. Intention communicates confidence. Confidence communicates strength. Another important layer is pacing. When under pressure, people tend to move and speak faster. Speed is often emotional. Slowing down disrupts the emotional current. If tension rises in a conversation, reduce your movement by 20%. Slow your speech slightly. Pause between sentences. This forces your nervous system to regulate, and it subtly shifts the atmosphere. I tested this once during a high-pressure conversation. I could feel my heart rate rising. Instead of trying to argue better, I focused entirely on breathing slower. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. I kept my hands still. My tone lowered slightly. Within minutes, the intensity dropped. Not just for me, but for the other person. Energy is contagious. So is stability. Control your physical presence and you influence the room. Eye contact is another powerful element. Avoiding eye contact signals insecurity. Overly aggressive staring signals dominance attempts. Balanced, calm eye contact signals steadiness. Hold it long enough to show confidence. Break it naturally, not nervously. The goal is not intimidation, it is composure. Another subtle habit to eliminate. Unnecessary self-touching. And touching your face, adjusting clothing repeatedly, rubbing your hands. These are self-soothing behaviors. They indicate internal tension. Awareness is the first step. Notice them, then reduce them deliberately. Over time, your body learns a new default, calm under stress. One of the most composed leaders I've observed barely moves when others are emotional. Not frozen, simply contained. When someone speaks passionately, he listens without shifting. When challenged, he responds without visible agitation. That containment creates gravity. Gravity draws attention, and attention under control creates authority. Remember this. If your body is reactive, your mind will follow. If your body is controlled, your mind gains leverage. This is not about performance. It's about alignment. Internal discipline reflected externally. Practice this daily. Walk slightly slower than usual. Sit upright instead of collapsing into chairs. Keep your gestures intentional rather than scattered. Before speaking in tense situations, inhale deeply and release slowly. These small habits compound. Over time, your baseline state shifts. You no longer look rushed. You no longer look unsettled. You no longer look easily moved. And when you are not easily moved physically, people assume you are not easily moved emotionally. That assumption creates psychological advantage. Control your reactions. Control your identity. Control your silence. Control your endurance. And now, control your body, because the body is the visible extension of discipline. Stillness signals strength, and strength that does not need to announce itself is difficult to challenge. Chapter 7. Become hard to manipulate. Manipulation only works on predictable people. If someone knows what will trigger you, they can guide you. If someone knows what flatters you, they can influence you. If someone knows what you fear losing, they can control you. Most manipulation is not dramatic. It's subtle. A raised eyebrow, a delayed reply, a carefully placed compliment, a strategic silence, and suddenly your behavior shifts. You explain more. You chase reassurance. You defend unnecessarily. That shift is leverage, and it didn't belong to you. I once watched this happen to a friend in a relationship. He was intelligent, grounded in most areas of life, but emotionally attached to approval from one specific person. Whenever she withdrew slightly, he leaned in more. Whenever she praised him, he relaxed. Whenever she criticized him, he scrambled to correct himself. The pattern was predictable, and because it was predictable, it was controllable. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't dramatic. But the dynamic was clear. His emotional state depended on her signals. That is how manipulation works. Not through force, through emotional hooks. Dangerous people are difficult to manipulate because they are emotionally self-contained. They do not rush to fix discomfort. They do not chase validation when it's withheld. They do not overreact when tension is introduced. Instead, they observe. Observation disrupts manipulation. One of the most important skills you can develop is recognizing emotional hooks. An emotional hook is anything that provokes an immediate internal reaction. Disrespect, exclusion, flattery, jealousy, fear of loss. When someone pulls one of these, your nervous system activates. If you react immediately, you confirm the hook works. If you pause, you weaken it. I learned this through a professional situation that shifted my perspective. There was someone who consistently tried to provoke subtle competition. Backhanded compliments, comparisons, slightly dismissive remarks framed as jokes. The old version of me would have responded defensively, clarified, asserted. Instead, I did something different. I didn't react emotionally. I didn't escalate. I didn't defend. I listened. Sometimes I responded briefly. Sometimes I let the comment pass. Over time, the behavior reduced. Why? Because manipulation requires response. Without response, it loses fuel. This does not mean tolerating disrespect silently in all cases. It means choosing response deliberately. And if someone crosses a boundary clearly, address it calmly and directly. But do not react from emotional surge. Respond from control. Another powerful principle: if someone can trigger you, they can steer you. Triggers are weaknesses waiting to be exploited. That may sound harsh, but it's accurate. Your work is not to eliminate emotion. It is to understand your triggers. Ask yourself, what comments make me defensive? What situations make me anxious? What types of people make me seek approval? What tones make me escalate? Awareness weakens vulnerability. A colleague once told me something powerful. He said, "The day I stopped reacting to passive aggression was the day it stopped working." Passive aggression thrives on emotional engagement. Calm clarity dismantles it. Another manipulation tactic is urgency. Someone pressures you for immediate decisions, immediate responses, immediate emotional investment. Urgency bypasses rational thought. Slow down. You're not obligated to decide instantly. You're not obligated to respond instantly. You are not obligated to react instantly. Time restores control. Flattery is another subtle tool. When someone praises you excessively, notice your internal reaction. Do you soften? Do you trust too quickly? Do you feel compelled to reciprocate? Flattery can disarm boundaries. Stay aware. Praise is pleasant, but it should not dictate behavior. A dangerous person accepts praise without dependency, accepts criticism without collapse, maintains center. One of the clearest signs that you are becoming hard to manipulate is emotional neutrality, not emotional numbness. Neutrality, compliment, steady. Criticism, steady. Delay, steady. Tension, steady. Steadiness frustrates manipulative behavior because manipulation seeks emotional leverage. Without leverage, there is no control. There was a moment when someone attempted to escalate a disagreement publicly. The tone sharpened intentionally. Instead of matching energy, I reduced mine. Slower speech, lower tone, minimal words. The escalation failed. Emotional fire needs oxygen. Calm removes oxygen. This is why control matters so deeply. When you are emotionally self-governed, you are not easily steered. Your decisions come from values, not reaction. Your boundaries remain intact under pressure. Your energy is not borrowed by someone else's behavior. This is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about strengthening internal stability so that influence requires logic, not emotional hooks. You want to reach a point where silence doesn't make you anxious. Disapproval doesn't make you defensive. Praise doesn't make you dependent. Provocation doesn't make you reactive. At that point, manipulation loses effectiveness. You become steady terrain, and steady terrain is hard to move. Practice this. The next time someone attempts to provoke you, delay your reaction. Notice the urge. Observe it. Let it settle. Respond only after your breathing normalizes. You will feel the difference immediately. The power dynamic shifts, because control of self is control of influence. Become aware of your triggers. Train your pause. Strengthen your neutrality. The less emotionally hooked you are, the freer you become. And freedom from manipulation is quiet power. Chapter 8. Own your inner world. There is one final layer of control that determines everything else. It is not your reactions, not your silence, not your body language, not even your endurance. It is ownership of your inner world. As long as you blame the outside for your instability, you remain fragile. Blame feels relieving in the moment. They disrespected me. They made me angry. They stressed me out. They forced my reaction. But here is the uncomfortable truth. No one forces your reaction. They create stimulus. You create response. The moment you accept that, power shifts back to you. There was a period in my life when I blamed circumstances constantly. Work pressure, other people's behavior, timing, environment. And on the surface, those reasons were valid. But I wasn't stable. Because my emotional state depended on conditions. If things went well, I felt strong. If things went wrong, I felt shaken. That is conditional control. Conditional control is weak control. I remember a turning point clearly. Something didn't go as planned. A decision backfired. The consequences were uncomfortable and visible. My instinct was to analyze external factors. Instead, I asked a different question. What part of this is mine? Not in a self-punishing way, in a clarifying way. That question changed everything. Ownership is not about guilt. It is about agency. When you take ownership, you stop asking, why did this happen to me? You start asking, what can I control next? That shift is powerful, because control over the next step is always available. A friend of mine went through a financial setback that shook him deeply. At first, he blamed the market. Timing, advice from others, all valid. But he remained anxious. Then something changed. He began reviewing his decisions without emotion, calmly, objectively. He said to me, I stopped looking for who to blame and started looking for what to improve. Within months, his confidence returned. Not because circumstances improved immediately, but because he regained control over his internal narrative. Ownership stabilizes identity. If your mood depends on the world behaving properly, you will always feel unstable. If your identity depends on others' approval, you will always feel uncertain. If your confidence depends on constant success, you will always fear failure. Owning your inner world means this. Your standards come from you. Your calm comes from you. Your discipline comes from you. Not your response comes from you, not from mood, not from environment, not from people, from you. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to surrender your center. There will always be unpredictable variables. Criticism, loss, misunderstanding, disappointment. The question is never whether these things will occur. The question is whether they destabilize your identity. Dangerous people are not those who never fail. They are those who never lose internal ownership. Even in chaos, they ask, what is within my control? Breathing, within control. Posture, within control. Tone, within control. Decision, within control. Everything else is secondary. Ownership also means confronting your weaknesses without denial. If you are reactive, admit it. If you seek validation, admit it. If you avoid discomfort, admit it. Denial protects ego. Ownership builds strength. There was a moment when I realized I had been using busyness as an excuse for lack of discipline. I said I didn't have time. In reality, I lacked structure. That realization stung, but it also empowered. Because once the excuse disappeared, improvement became possible. Ownership removes excuses, and excuses are emotional cushions. They soften discomfort, but prevent growth. Owning your inner world means choosing responsibility over relief. Responsibility is heavier, but it builds muscle. Relief is lighter, but it builds weakness. When something goes wrong this week, notice your first internal reaction. Is it blame, or is it ownership? Even subtle blame keeps you reactive. Ownership keeps you grounded. Another powerful exercise. At the end of each day, ask yourself 3 questions. Where did I lose control today? Where did I maintain control? What will I adjust tomorrow? No drama, no judgment, just review. That daily audit strengthens internal authority. Because authority is not declared, it is practiced. Over time, something changes. You stop fearing external instability because you trust internal stability. You stop worrying about being misunderstood because you are anchored. You stop reacting to every shift in environment because your center does not move easily. Owning your inner world is the final evolution of self-control. It is the difference between someone who manages moments and someone who commands presence. Commanding presence does not require aggression. It requires consistency. Consistency of reaction, consistency of tone, consistency of discipline, consistency of ownership. When you reach that level, something subtle but powerful happens. People feel it. They feel that you are not easily shaken. They feel that you are not easily manipulated. They feel that you do not collapse under pressure. That feeling creates respect, and respect built on internal stability lasts. Control your reactions. Separate emotion from identity. Master silence. Endure discomfort. Release validation. Control your body. Resist manipulation. And finally, own your inner world. Because once you own yourself, the world has far less leverage over you, and that is what makes you truly dangerous. Through control. There is a version of you that reacts to everything, and there is a version of you that chooses. This entire journey has been about closing the distance between those two versions. Becoming dangerous through self-control is not about intimidation. It is not about emotional coldness. It is not about suppressing who you are. It is about refinement. It is about transforming raw reaction into deliberate response. If you reflect on everything we've covered, a pattern becomes clear. Control your reactions. Separate emotion from identity. Master silence. Endure discomfort. Stop seeking validation. Control your body language. Become hard to manipulate. Own your inner world. Each chapter is a layer, but together they form something larger. Internal sovereignty. And I want to share something personal here. When I first started working on self-control, I thought it would make me less expressive, less passionate, and less alive. What actually happened was the opposite. I became clearer. My emotions didn't disappear. They became manageable. My voice didn't weaken. It became steadier. My presence didn't shrink. It became heavier. There is a kind of strength that does not shout. It does not rush to prove itself. It does not scramble to defend itself. It does not crumble under pressure. It observes. It breathes. It chooses. And in a world addicted to reaction, that kind of strength stands out immediately. Think about how rare it is to meet someone who remains composed in conflict, someone who does not escalate when provoked, someone who does not overshare to feel secure, someone who does not chase approval. That rarity is power. You don't need to dominate a room to command it. You don't need to win every argument to maintain authority. You don't need to be aggressive to be respected. You need control. I've seen people lose opportunities because they couldn't control a single reaction. I've seen relationships dissolve because someone couldn't separate emotion from identity. I've seen talented individuals undermine their own presence through nervous body language or constant validation seeking. And I've seen the opposite. I've seen quiet individuals rise because they were steady. I've seen calm responses diffuse heated situations instantly. I've seen people transform their reputation simply by speaking less and reacting slower. The shift is subtle, but profound. Control compounds. Every time you pause instead of react, you strengthen discipline. Every time you endure discomfort instead of avoiding it, you expand capacity. And every time you refuse to be manipulated emotionally, you reinforce identity. This is not about perfection. You will still feel anger. You will still feel fear. You will still feel insecurity. The difference is what you do next. Control does not eliminate emotion. It governs it. And governance is the mark of maturity. I want to leave you with something practical, something you can implement immediately. A 7-day control reset. Day 1. Reaction. Audit. Notice every moment you feel triggered. Do not change anything yet. Just observe. Day 2. The pause rule. Before responding to anything emotionally charged, wait 3 seconds. Day 3. Silence training. Speak slightly less than usual. Let silence exist without rushing to fill it. Day 4. Discomfort practice. Do one thing you've been avoiding, intentionally. Day 5. Validation fast. Make decisions without explaining them excessively. No over-apologizing. Day 6. Physical stillness. Slow your movements. Control your breathing in every tense moment. Day 7. Ownership review. At the end of the day, write down where you maintained control and where you lost it. 7 days will not transform you completely, but it will wake you up. And once you become aware of your patterns, you cannot unsee them. There is something deeply empowering about knowing that your emotional state is not easily hijacked, that someone else's tone cannot dictate your mood, that criticism does not destabilize your identity, that silence does not intimidate you, that discomfort does not scare you, that approval does not control you. That is freedom, and freedom is dangerous in the best way, because a person who governs themselves cannot be easily governed by others. They cannot be baited into foolish reactions. They cannot be manipulated by flattery or fear. They cannot be shaken by temporary chaos. They become stable in unstable environments. And stability under pressure changes how the world responds to you. You will notice people choosing their words more carefully around you. You will notice tension dissolving faster in your presence. You will notice that opportunities gravitate towards steadiness, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Control is quiet, but its impact is loud. As you move forward from this moment, remember this. You don't need to prove your strength. You need to practice it. You don't need to announce your discipline. You need to live it. You don't need to intimidate anyone. You need to remain unmoved when necessary. Becoming dangerous through self-control is not a performance. It is a daily discipline, a discipline of breathing before speaking, of thinking before reacting, of choosing before moving. And the more consistently you apply it, the less the world can destabilize you. Power begins where reaction ends. Control begins where ego pauses. Respect begins where steadiness is visible. Carry this with you. Practice it quietly. Let others react. You remain centered, because the most dangerous presence in any room is the one that cannot be shaken.